In the frozen silence of time, the Earth has rewritten itself again and again. Beneath our feet lies a layered memory, buried under kilometers of ice, folded in stone, suspended in oceanic sediments. The story of our planet's past is not a linear one. It is cyclical, erasing and rebirthing itself through epochs of glaciation and thaw. Each ice age is not merely a climate event, but a reset, a soft deletion of civilizations, landscapes, and perhaps even entire chapters of knowledge. Scientists have long mapped these glacial cycles through isotopic data, fossil records, and shifting coastlines. Yet something remains unspoken. Between each age of ice, fragments of impossible architecture appear where they should not exist. Maps like the Piri Reis show continents beneath ice sheets. Megaliths rest on bedrock dated to times when no civilization was thought to exist. Did ancient humans, or something before them, understand the cycles of ice? Were they erased by it, or did they try to warn us through stone? If Earth's deep memory is encoded in glaciers, then perhaps the ice does not only preserve, it conceals. Welcome to Historic Sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The story begins where memory freezes, not in the written archives of civilization, but in the layered silence of the Earth itself. Deep within the polar ice sheets, scientists have drilled cylinders of time, ice cores that stretch back hundreds of thousands of years, each millimeter a record of ancient air, volcanic ash, and subtle shifts in temperature. To most, these frozen columns are just climate data. But to others, geologists, mythologists, and seekers of lost histories, they are something more profound, the geological diary of human amnesia. Each trapped bubble of air whispers of an atmosphere that once breathed differently. Within the frozen dust, traces of elements tell of cataclysmic events, abrupt temperature drops, massive volcanic eruptions, sudden meltwater pulses. These spikes and collapses, recorded in the isotopic graphs, align with inexplicable gaps in human history. Around 12,800 years ago, for example, one of the sharpest cooling events on record occurred. The Younger Dryas, a period when global temperatures plunged almost overnight, extinguishing countless species and resetting ecosystems. To mainstream science, it was an abrupt but natural climate reversal. But to those who read between the lines of myth and sediment, it marked the end of something far older, an age when advanced knowledge may have thrived and perished under the ice. The idea is not new. Across cultures, ancient traditions speak of an earlier world, a radiant, flourishing age that ended in flood, fire, and cold. The Greeks called it the Age of Gold, followed by the Deluge. The Hopi told of worlds that rose and fell before the current one. The Sumerians listed kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the flood swept over. And in the Vedic scriptures, cycles of destruction and renewal, yugas, describe cosmic resets written into time itself. What modern science calls glacial cycles, the ancients encoded as divine epochs. Perhaps both were right, each describing the same phenomenon through different languages of memory. For centuries, glaciation was seen as a purely natural rhythm, the slow breathing of Earth. Yet something about the pattern disturbs that simplicity. The transition from warm to frozen, from fertile to desolate, happens too abruptly, too violently, as if triggered. Geological strata reveal sudden floods where ice dams collapsed, releasing inland oceans. Some scientists point to impacts, fragments of comets or asteroids striking ice sheets, vaporizing landscapes in moments. The black mat layer found across North America, rich in nanodiamonds and melt glass, hints at a cosmic intrusion around the time the mammoths vanished. But what if it wasn't just an extinction of animals? What if it was the quiet annihilation of memory itself? The evidence of something lost flickers through anomalies. The granite blocks of Baalbek, weighing hundreds of tons, rest on foundations whose precision defies explanation. The Sphinx bears erosion patterns consistent with long, torrential rainfall, a climate Egypt has not seen since before 10,000 BCE. The megaliths of Göbekli Tepe, now dated to the end of the last ice age, suggest complex organization and astronomical knowledge centuries before the so-called dawn of civilization. Why would hunter-gatherers, fresh out of the Paleolithic, carve pillars aligned with solstices and constellations? Unless, perhaps, they were remembering something, rebuilding from fragments of an earlier world swallowed by ice. It is here that the boundary between science and myth begins to blur. Plato's tale of Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, places its destruction around 9,600 BCE, precisely when the Younger Dryas ended and the earth warmed again. Meltwater surged into the oceans, raising sea levels by more than 100 meters, drowning coastal plains where early settlements may have stood. Underwater topography around the Bahamas, the coast of India, and the South China Sea reveals structures that resemble roads, terraces, and even temple-like formations. Mainstream archaeology hesitates to call them artificial, but sonar and LiDAR images suggest geometric patterns nature rarely repeats. If glacial eras are Earth's recurring heartbeat, then every pulse may erase more than it creates. The ice advances, grinding continents like a slow avalanche, scouring clean all traces of what came before. When it retreats, it leaves behind a tabula rasa, fertile ground for a new beginning, a new story, and new gods. But some memories are too persistent to vanish entirely. They resurface as myths, as symbols carved in rock, as alignments pointing to forgotten skies. Ancient monuments across the planet, from Machu Picchu to Angkor Wat, seem to encode celestial maps not of their own age, but of skies thousands of years older. Who built them, and for what purpose, remains the question suspended between geology and legend. The alignment between the heavens and the ice is not coincidence. Astronomers studying Milankovitch cycles, the subtle changes in Earth's orbit, tilt, and wobble, note that they correspond almost perfectly with the timing of ice ages. The ancients, too, seemed obsessed with these celestial rhythms. The Mayan long count calendar, the Egyptian concept of Zep-Tepi, the Hindu cycles of yugas, all describe vast stretches of time repeating through cosmic alignment. Did they inherit this awareness from observation? Or was it a remnant of knowledge preserved from a previous epoch that understood the sky not as myth, but as mechanism? In 1973, researchers discovered evidence that challenged the linear view of civilization. Beneath the ice of Greenland, they found pollen from trees that could only have grown in temperate climates, implying the region was once forested. Around the same time, ocean sediment cores revealed sudden rises in carbon and dust consistent with widespread burning, as if forests and cities alike had perished in an immense conflagration. The coincidence with myths of global fire followed by flood is difficult to ignore. When the ice melted, entire landscapes vanished beneath the sea. Yet on some remote highlands, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Caucasus, myths recall survivors who carried knowledge through the cataclysm. They spoke of rebuilding, of replanting, of teaching agriculture and astronomy to those who had forgotten. Modern science dismisses such tales as cultural memory stretched by imagination. But perhaps imagination is simply memory in exile. The question that haunts every layer of permafrost, every sediment core, is not what the Earth remembers, but what it has chosen to forget. The magnetic flips recorded in lava flows, the trace of radiation in ancient clays, the glacified sands of deserts, all hint that civilization may not be the first to reach the brink of understanding or destruction. If we read the Earth like a palimpsest, scraping back the newer inscriptions, what else might we find? Beneath Antarctica's vast ice sheet, 2 miles thick in places, radar has revealed mountain ranges and subglacial lakes. Some geologists believe these landscapes have been sealed for millions of years. Yet others whisper that anomalies beneath the ice hint at artificial symmetry, patterns too ordered to be explained by tectonic processes alone. Whether natural or not, the ice guards its secrets well. The last time Antarctica was ice-free, according to geological models, was roughly 12 million years ago, long before humans are thought to have existed. But if even one of the ancient maps, such as the Piri Reis, truly depicts its coastline beneath the ice, then the question is not when humans began, but what we have forgotten. Each glacial era acts as both destroyer and preserver. The cold erases, yet it also entombs. Beneath glaciers, archaeologists have found perfectly preserved bodies, seeds, tools, snapshots of vanished worlds. The melting ice of the 21st century is now returning them to us. As the permafrost thaws, mummified animals and human remains emerge, their DNA rewriting timelines. It is as if the Earth itself, waking from a long freeze, is offering back fragments of the last civilization it buried. But how much remains to be uncovered before the next cycle begins? Perhaps the glacial rhythm is not random, but programmed, a planetary reset that ensures balance through destruction. Every civilization rises toward complexity, only to meet the cold hand of entropy, and yet each leaves behind a whisper, a carving, a myth, a stone that points toward the stars. The ice comes, and history closes like a lid. When it recedes, consciousness blooms again, and the cycle restarts, ignorant of what came before. Maybe the true lost knowledge is not about how to survive the cold, but how to remember through it. As the modern world stares into melting poles and rising seas, the patterns seem to repeat. The climate shifts, species vanish, coastlines change. But this time, the data is in our hands. The very same isotopic patterns that once marked ancient catastrophes now blink from our satellites. The question is whether we recognize the rhythm, or whether, like those before us, we mistake it for chance. The glaciers do not move quickly, but they are relentless. In their patience, they have witnessed the rise and fall of worlds. Perhaps one day, long after the next freeze, when new beings walk the thawing ruins of our cities, they too will find traces of an age that thought itself eternal. They will dig into the ice, and the air trapped within will whisper of us, of warmth, of fire, of machines that hummed beneath the stars, and they will wonder, as we do now, whether the past was lost by accident or by design. The ice remembers, but it does not speak. Not yet. The mystery of Earth's deep past does not lie only in frozen cores or drowned continents. It lingers in the myths that refuse to die. Myths are not mere stories. They are coded memories, fossilized in language, traveling across generations long after the facts they describe have turned to dust. When examined carefully, they echo geological truths long before the modern sciences could measure them. From the Arctic to the equator, ancient people spoke of great winters, floods of fire, skies that darkened for years. Across continents separated by oceans, they remembered the same silence of ice descending, and the same voices that tried to preserve what was known before it came. In the high plateaus of Bolivia, at a place called Puma Punku, immense stone blocks lie scattered like the remnants of a dismantled machine. Each slab is cut with a precision rivaling modern engineering. Interlocking joints, razor-straight grooves, surfaces smoothed with inexplicable accuracy. The site, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, is officially dated to around 500 CE. Yet erosion, sediment layers, and the scale of construction hint at something far older. Local legends call it a city built by the first men before the world was covered in frost. The Aymara people speak of gods descending from the sky, teaching geometry and agriculture before disappearing when the sun stood still and the waters came. The echoes are familiar. A golden age, divine teachers, then a sudden catastrophe. Similar tales exist thousands of miles away. In the myths of the Dogon of Mali, there is mention of an age before the desert, when their ancestors were guided by Nomo, amphibious beings from the stars, who arrived when the world was cold and left when it thawed. Scholars who studied the Dogon traditions in the mid-20th century were puzzled to find astronomical knowledge embedded in oral memory, an understanding of the Sirius binary system invisible to the naked eye. Coincidence, perhaps? Or perhaps a hint that knowledge once flourished globally, then was scattered like seeds across tribes as the glaciers withdrew. What connects these fragments, from Tiwanaku to Dogon to the Vedic hymns of India, is the pattern of loss and remembrance. Ancient seers, priests, and astronomers seemed obsessed with marking time, aligning stone to stars, counting ages that preceded them. They did not think history began with them. They believed they were living in the ruins of something older. Even in Greece, Hesiod described the decline from the age of gold to the age of iron, each age marked by moral and physical decay, as if humanity itself was deteriorating after an ancient fall. What was that fall? Was it simply mythological, or the fading echo of an environmental catastrophe that shattered civilizations, forcing survivors to rebuild from ash and ice? Geological records reveal that the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets reached their greatest extent, covered much of North America, Europe, and Asia in white silence. Sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters, exposing vast coastal plains now hidden underwater. If early human societies developed along these coastlines, as evidence suggests, then their destruction during the rapid melt would have erased nearly everything they built. The proof of their existence would now lie beneath continental shelves, entombed in silt. Archaeologists have only begun to search these submerged worlds. Off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Khambhat, Sonar scans in the early 2000s revealed what appeared to be grid-like structures, roads, and geometric ruins dating back nearly 9,000 years, older than any known city. Samples dredged from the seabed contained pottery fragments and human artifacts, though the debate continues. If genuine, it would rewrite the story of civilization's origin, pushing it back into the Ice Age itself. And yet, why is such evidence so often dismissed? Why do so many findings that contradict the established timeline vanish into silence or skepticism? Perhaps because rewriting history demands rewriting everything built upon it. The accepted narrative, that human civilization began around 5,000 years ago in Sumer and Egypt, leaves little room for forgotten epochs. But fragments keep emerging, forcing us to confront the possibility that humanity's first great cultures were not its first at all, that what we call the beginning might in fact be a return. One of the most perplexing clues lies in the orientation of ancient monuments. The Great Pyramids of Giza, for instance, are aligned almost perfectly to true north, a feat difficult even with modern instruments. But they are not aligned to the current north. Their orientation matches celestial positions from over 12,000 years ago, the same period when the Earth was emerging from its last glacial age. Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock, among others, proposed that this alignment was intentional, that the pyramids were built as a mirror of the stars during an age long forgotten. Mainstream Egyptology rejects this, but the precision remains unexplained. Who measured the heavens so long ago? And why did they encode that moment in stone? Further south, in Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the desert like massive geoglyphs, visible only from the sky. Spirals, animals, and straight lines running for kilometers, carved with purpose, yet whose meaning eludes us. Some theorize they are astronomical markers, others ritual pathways. But many of these lines align with the solstices and star risings, as if the builders were not worshipping the heavens, but recording them. A map for time itself, preserved through geometry rather than text. The same principle appears in megalithic circles across Europe: Stonehenge, Avebury, Karnak, all connected to solstices and lunar cycles. But these were not isolated inventions. From Easter Island to the mountains of Armenia, stone observatories seem to speak the same language, an obsession with cosmic recurrence. To track the heavens is to track time, and perhaps to anticipate what the ancients feared most, the return of the cold. In mythic symbolism, ice is never just ice. It is stasis, forgetting, death, the end of movement. Fire, by contrast, is knowledge, the spark of creation. Many myths describe the theft of fire from the gods, a metaphor perhaps for recovering lost wisdom after a long winter of ignorance. Prometheus steals flame for humanity. In the Vedic tale, Agni hides within the waters until the sages call him forth again. Could these stories be allegories for post-glacial renewal, the rediscovery of science, agriculture, astronomy, after the long freeze erased the past? The last ice age was not merely a geological epoch. It was a crucible. It shaped coastlines, species, and the destiny of humans. Yet, there are indications that its end was not gradual, but violently abrupt. Around 10,800 BCE, as ice sheets melted and fresh water poured into the North Atlantic, oceanic currents shifted, plunging the planet back into near glacial conditions. The event lasted over 1,000 years, then ended as swiftly as it began. This cycle of chaos may have been remembered as the flood in countless traditions, the moment when the waters covered the earth. But the flood was not just water. It was the submergence of memory. Every artifact, every story, drowned beneath the waves. Still, fragments survived. In Sumer, the Epic of Gilgamesh preserved the tale of Utnapishtim, the survivor of a great deluge sent by the gods. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah. In Hindu texts, Manu. In Mesoamerica, Coxcox. Different names, same story. A man warned of destruction, building a vessel to save knowledge and life. Could this be the record of scattered survivors from a prehistoric catastrophe, remembered through myth until it solidified into scripture? The timing aligns eerily with the rapid sea level rise after the last ice age, as if each culture preserved a memory of the same event, each from its own shore. The recurring theme is survival through transmission. Those who remembered tried to encode what they knew, not just in words, but in architecture, orientation, and myth, a universal language of stone and star. The ancients may have understood that language outlasts voice, and geometry outlasts empire. If we could learn to read it again, to decode the geometry of memory, perhaps we could reconstruct fragments of the world before the ice. The question is whether we are willing to look. Because if the Earth has erased civilizations before, it may do so again. Our warming world mirrors the chaos that closed the last ice age. Melting ice, rising seas, climatic instability. The cycle turns once more. Perhaps it is not just a warning, but an invitation to remember before the next forgetting begins. The ice may conceal, but it also protects. Beneath its cold patience lie secrets not yet revealed, archives waiting for the right warmth to thaw them free. Somewhere beneath the Antarctic crust, beneath Greenland's ancient glaciers, perhaps the next revelation sleeps. Frozen libraries of a time when humans were not yet the only keepers of knowledge. In every myth of creation, there is a silence before the first word. Perhaps that silence is ice, and the word that follows, fire. The cycle continues, and the past whispers through the melt. What we choose to hear will decide what future is written when the ice returns. Beneath the shifting sands of forgotten continents, a deeper question emerges, not merely what was lost, but why. Was it only nature's indifference that buried whole epochs under ice and ocean, or did human arrogance hasten the erasure? When we examine the great transitions of Earth's glacial past, a pattern forms, a cycle of knowledge ascending toward brilliance, followed by a collapse into silence. In this rhythm, civilizations rise not once, but many times, each believing themselves the first, and each ultimately consumed by the same forgetting. The geological record, though mute, tells a story of sudden transitions. Ice ages do not arrive as slow drifts, but as abrupt transformations. Around the end of the Younger Dryas, roughly 11,600 years ago, the planet's temperature leapt by nearly 10 degrees in a geological instant. Oceans surged, forests spread where once lay tundra. To some researchers, this warming marked the dawn of modern civilization. To others, it signified the end of one far older. What if those lost societies, the builders of the impossible, faced not gradual decline, but a global catastrophe too immense to record in any tongue but myth? Across the planet, from the ruins of Anatolia to the submerged plateaus of the Pacific, evidence whispers of human presence deep within the Ice Age. Göbekli Tepe, carved into the hills of southeastern Turkey, rises from a time when the world was still thawing, around 9,600 BCE. Its stone circles are adorned with precise reliefs, foxes, vultures, and abstract symbols arranged with cosmic intent. The entire site was deliberately buried under tons of earth, preserved like a message sealed for the future. Archaeologists claim it was the work of hunter-gatherers, but no one can explain why such a people would carve in stone a knowledge of astronomy and symmetry more advanced than anything seen for thousands of years afterward. It is as though the site were built not at the beginning of civilization, but at its twilight, a final monument to memory before the ice erased everything else. From that same period, strange artifacts emerge. The Antikythera mechanism from Greece, an analog computer of gears and precision engineering discovered in the wreckage of a Roman ship. Dated to around 100 BCE, it seems far too advanced for its time, yet its principles suggest inheritance, not invention. The craftsmanship implies a lineage of knowledge passed down, distorted, then rediscovered, remnants of a science whose roots may reach back into the forgotten ages before recorded history. Even Plato hinted at this chain of memory when he wrote that whatever has come to be before has perished and will again. In his dialogue, Timaeus, he described Egyptian priests telling Solon that the Greeks were children. They possessed no ancient tradition because every few thousand years, fire or flood wiped clean the slate of civilization. Each cycle began anew, ignorant of what came before. The deeper we look into Earth's layers, the more this possibility haunts us. Subglacial anomalies in Greenland hint at structures beneath miles of ice, radar patterns too geometric to dismiss. Satellite imagery of Antarctica reveals symmetrical ridges and subglacial formations that some claim resemble buried architecture. Officially, these are natural, products of tectonics and ice movement. Yet the coincidence of their forms with mythic accounts of polar civilizations cannot be ignored. Ancient texts across cultures speak of a land at the world's edge, covered in perpetual cold, home to the gods or the first men. In Greek tradition, it was Hyperborea. In Hindu lore, Shvetadvipa, the White Island. In Norse sagas, it was Ultima Thule. Each described as both a paradise and a prison, a world that vanished when the axis of heaven shifted. Modern scientists now know that Earth's poles have not been fixed throughout time. Crustal displacement and axial wobble, processes driven by gravitational imbalance and redistribution of mass, could indeed cause continents to shift position relative to the poles over millennia. Charles Hapgood, in his controversial Path of the Pole, suggested that such a displacement might explain ancient maps depicting Antarctica ice-free. Albert Einstein himself, though cautious, wrote that Hapgood's hypothesis was not impossible. If such a shift occurred during the last deglaciation, the resulting earthquakes, tsunamis, and climate chaos could have obliterated all traces of pre-existing civilizations. What would remain after thousands of years of ice would be only myth. And perhaps myth is exactly what we inherited. The stories of the gods descending from the sky, the floods that cleansed the earth, the survivors who carried the seed of civilization. They could be encoded memories of a global reset. The Book of Enoch speaks of watchers who descended to earth before the deluge, teaching humans forbidden arts, metallurgy, astronomy, writing, and then being buried under mountains of ice as punishment. The same motif echoes in Sumerian tablets describing the Anunnaki, celestial beings who descended to shape mankind. Whether divine or allegorical, these narratives suggest the transmission of knowledge from a vanished source, a source that disappeared when the climate shifted, leaving behind fragments mistaken for myths. Some scientists have begun to entertain this notion in cautious terms, not of gods, but of lost sophistication. In 2018, a team from the University of Edinburgh analyzed global megalithic structures and found recurring astronomical alignments pointing to constellations visible between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. They concluded that ancient builders across continents encoded the memory of a celestial event, possibly a meteor swarm that initiated the Younger Dryas cooling. This would imply a form of knowledge sharing or observation not confined to isolated tribes, but widespread and organized. The scale of coordination implied by such architecture, from Egypt to Peru, suggests that the human story might once have been global long before recorded history began. The same year, beneath the melting ice of Alaska and Canada, researchers uncovered layers of carbon-rich debris dating precisely to the onset of the Younger Dryas, a horizon of blackened soil filled with microspherules, platinum anomalies, and nanodiamonds, all markers of high-energy impact. This discovery reignited the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, proposing that fragments of a disintegrating comet struck the northern hemisphere around 12,800 years ago, causing fires, floods, and a sudden return to glacial conditions. To the survivors, it would have felt as though the sky itself had fallen. Is it any wonder that nearly every ancient culture preserved a story of the heavens punishing humanity? But what if this punishment was not celestial wrath, but consequence, the aftermath of knowledge used without wisdom? There are hints, faint but provocative, that pre-Ice Age societies may have understood energies and planetary forces that modern science is only now rediscovering. Legends of the Vimanas in Sanskrit texts describe flying craft powered by mercury vortices. Egyptian reliefs from Dendera show what appear to be electrical devices. The Baghdad battery, simple but functional, demonstrates electrochemical knowledge millennia before its supposed invention. Even if these artifacts do not prove technological civilization, they suggest that humanity's curiosity has flared into genius before, and then, perhaps, into catastrophe. It is tempting to see all this as coincidence, fragments connected by imagination. Yet imagination is often the last refuge of memory that cannot find its evidence. When the glaciers returned, they erased everything but myth, and so what survived became religion. The gods became metaphors for forces once understood scientifically. The flood became divine punishment instead of planetary reset. The serpent, that ancient symbol of cyclical renewal, became both savior and destroyer, winding through the myths of every continent. If the ancients encoded warnings, perhaps they knew that ice would one day return. The precession of the equinoxes, a slow 26,000-year wobble of Earth's axis, was known to several ancient cultures long before modern astronomy confirmed it. Such awareness implies long-term observation, spanning generations. The precessional cycle marks not only shifts in the stars, but in climate, magnetic field, and even consciousness, if ancient traditions are to be believed. Each age ends when the alignment crosses a cosmic threshold, an astronomical moment echoed in the myths of apocalypse and rebirth. We are, once again, approaching one. As modern climate systems destabilize, we find ourselves in a mirror of that ancient threshold, glaciers melting, magnetic poles wandering, temperatures swinging beyond prediction. The same cycle that buried past worlds stirs beneath our feet. Yet unlike those before us, we possess records, instruments, data, and still we forget. The lessons encoded in stone are dismissed as superstition, the patterns in myth as coincidence. But perhaps those ancient storytellers, gazing at skies filled with fire, were not speaking of divine wrath at all. Perhaps they were describing what they saw, a world undone by the same arrogance that blinds us now. The earth, in its vast patience, allows life to rise and fall in rhythm. It keeps no grudge, but it never spares ignorance. Ice is its quiet instrument, both destroyer and archivist. Beneath each layer of frozen time, something waits. Seeds of lost forests, traces of forgotten machines, whispers of songs that once told the sky's true motion. If one listens closely, through the hum of glaciers and the static of data, one can almost hear it, the heartbeat of cycles, slow but certain, reminding us that no civilization is beyond erasure. And so the question deepens. Is history merely a human narrative or a planetary one? If Earth itself resets through ice and fire, then perhaps every age of humanity is but a rehearsal, each ending not in extinction, but in exile. A scattering of survivors who begin again with fragments, myths, and faint memories of stars that once guided them. We are their descendants, living on the edge of another turning, unaware that our greatest discovery might be not new knowledge, but the recovery of what was once known and lost to the frost. In the end, the glaciers are not just frozen water. They are frozen truth. And truth, like ice, eventually melts. If there is one constant in Earth's long story, it is that memory does not survive unguarded. The glaciers move like editors of time, erasing whole paragraphs of existence with each advance. Yet what they destroy, they also seal, preserving whispers of worlds that once breathed under a gentler sun. As the ice recedes, those whispers begin to surface again, in fossils, ruins, and myths that sound like prophecies. The deeper one listens, the clearer it becomes. The end of one age is never absolute. It is a pause between breaths, a moment of amnesia before remembrance begins again. When the last ice age loosened its grip, the Earth must have appeared both reborn and broken. Sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Entire land bridges that once connected continents were swallowed by the sea. The Great Plains of Doggerland, a green expanse linking Britain to mainland Europe, became the bottom of the North Sea. The Beringian tundra, which once joined Siberia to Alaska, vanished beneath rising waters, leaving behind isolated populations who carried fragments of knowledge and myth into the Americas. Everywhere, the map of the world changed. Rivers flooded, mountains crumbled, and in the wake of that chaos, human consciousness began again, carrying in its veins the echo of what came before. Those echoes are written not only in myth, but in the Earth's magnetic scars. Beneath layers of sediment, scientists have detected traces of geomagnetic reversals, moments when the planet's magnetic poles flipped, sometimes within centuries. The last such event, the Lachamp excursion around 42,000 years ago, coincided with a wave of extinctions and climatic instability. Some researchers now suspect that such magnetic chaos might have thinned the atmosphere's shield against cosmic radiation, altering climate patterns and possibly even triggering behavioral shifts in humans and animals. In mythology, these same periods are remembered as eras of darkness, of suns that faltered or skies that burned red. The Norse spoke of Fimbulwinter, the great winter that would precede the twilight of the gods. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the previous world ends when the sky collapses and humans are turned to stone. To those who lived through magnetic storms and collapsing ecosystems, it must have felt like the end of creation itself. But after every collapse comes renewal. Around 9,500 BCE, when glaciers retreated and temperatures stabilized, humanity began to build again. Archaeological evidence shows the simultaneous rise of agriculture in several regions: the Fertile Crescent, the Yangtze Basin, the Andes. Each appears unconnected, yet all follow the same rhythm: domestication of plants, mastery of water, and the sudden emergence of architectural planning. The coincidence is uncanny. How did scattered hunter-gatherers, separated by oceans, develop the same breakthroughs within the same few millennia? Was it simple convergence, or the reawakening of inherited knowledge buried deep in collective memory? The remnants of this first great reconstruction are scattered like puzzle pieces. In Mesopotamia, myths tell of the god Enki teaching humans how to plant and irrigate. In Egypt, Thoth emerges as the keeper of writing and science. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl arrives after a great flood to bring order and wisdom to survivors. Across all traditions, there is a repeating motif: divine beings, or perhaps remnants of a forgotten civilization, guiding humanity back to knowledge. Were these simply the memories of refugees from the pre-glacial world, carrying fragments of science disguised as myth? Evidence continues to suggest that something profound was remembered, even if distorted through time. In Turkey, the ancient city of Derinkuyu descends 8 levels underground, with air shafts, wells, and storage rooms engineered with astonishing precision. Some scholars believe it was built to withstand invasion, but others point to its ventilation design and vast scale as protection from something environmental, perhaps a return of the ice or an atmospheric catastrophe. Similar subterranean complexes exist in Cappadocia, Peru, and even beneath the deserts of Egypt. It is as if the ancient world shared a collective fear of the sky itself, and an instinct to go below when the heavens turned hostile. In the highlands of Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman defies explanation. The stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, fit together without mortar, their edges curved as if molded like clay. Geologists note that the stones show signs of vitrification, partial melting, as though exposed to intense heat. Legends in the Andes speak of a sun that fell too close, forcing survivors to flee into the mountains. Could this be a memory of a solar event or atmospheric firestorm linked to the climatic shifts that ended the Ice Age? The coincidence between physical evidence and oral memory is striking. What if the megaliths themselves were not monuments, but shelters constructed to endure an age of fire and frost? Across the oceans, in Japan's Yonaguni Monument, divers have discovered massive stone terraces descending beneath the sea. The formations resemble temples and steps, shaped with right angles that suggest human design. Carbon dating of coral attached to the stones places submersion around 10,000 BCE, again at the end of the last glacial period. Skeptics argue they are natural formations, yet the coincidence of timing and geometry cannot be dismissed easily. If Yonaguni was once part of a coastal civilization, then its disappearance beneath the waves mirrors that of dozens of other submerged ruins now found along continental shelves from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean. What connects these sites is not only their antiquity, but their orientation. Many align with solstices, equinoxes, and constellations, as if marking cosmic cycles rather than local events. Such consistency implies an inherited system of knowledge, perhaps astronomical, passed through generations as myth until it was carved back into stone. It is the same impulse that drove the builders of Göbekli Tepe to align pillars to Sirius, or the architects of Stonehenge to track lunar standstills. To remember the sky was to remember time, and time, to the ancients, was survival. The rediscovery of this connection between heaven and earth may have marked the birth of religion as we know it. In the absence of written records, symbols became the language of preservation. The serpent, coiling and uncoiling, represented cyclical time. The flood symbolized purification and renewal. The mountain, standing against the sky, embodied continuity amid chaos. Through ritual and myth, the survivors encoded the memory of cosmic patterns, ensuring that even if the science was lost, the warning would endure. And yet, over millennia, the symbols detached from their meanings, becoming dogma instead of data. The guardians of knowledge turned into priests, and the science of cycles became theology. This gradual corruption of memory may be the true tragedy of the post-glacial world. The more humanity rebuilt, the less it remembered why it had fallen. The great empires that followed, Sumer, Egypt, Indus, Maya, all claimed descent from divine teachers, yet each repeated the same hubris. They raised monuments to eternity, unaware that eternity is precisely what the earth denies. The ice may sleep, but it never dies. Each civilization assumes the world is stable, that its climate, rivers, and skies will remain as they are. But the evidence beneath our feet contradicts that illusion. Glacial cores show that stability is the exception, not the rule. Today, the faint outlines of that cycle return. The Arctic thaws, ancient viruses trapped in permafrost reawaken. Methane bubbles rise from Siberian lakes like exhalations of ghosts. The ice retreats, revealing the bones of mammoths and the bones of forgotten truths. What will it reveal next? Perhaps the ruins of a world that mirrors our own, a civilization that rose in warmth and perished when the planet rebelled against its excess. The irony would be poetic and devastating. Modern scientists, armed with data rather than myth, now trace these patterns with precision. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica reveal that climate change can occur with terrifying speed, shifts of 10 degrees within a human lifetime. The ocean currents that stabilize global temperatures can collapse abruptly, plunging continents into drought or ice. To our ancestors, such events appeared divine. To us, they are equations. But whether interpreted as wrath or physics, the outcome remains the same. Reset. Perhaps that is the deeper meaning of the glacial rhythm, not punishment, but correction. The planet restores balance through destruction, and in doing so, it renews life's capacity to begin again. In that light, the ancient myths of floods and fires are not merely tales of loss, but of cosmic equilibrium. The gods do not destroy out of anger, they cleanse so that memory might be reborn pure. Yet humanity, restless in its amnesia, refuses to listen. We dig deeper, build higher, and drain the earth as if it were inexhaustible. The same arrogance that preceded past collapses returns, disguised as progress. We record everything, believing that data is preservation. But when the next ice descends, servers will freeze, satellites will fall, and the knowledge we thought eternal will vanish as surely as the libraries of Alexandria or the archives of Atlantis. The cycle does not care for pride. It cares only for balance. Somewhere in this quiet pattern lies a choice: to remember consciously this time, to study the scars of the past not as relics but as mirrors. The next age of ice will come, whether through nature's design or humanity's neglect. But what if we approached it differently, not as victims, but as witnesses? What if the true legacy of those who came before us is not their ruins, but their warnings? In the end, the glaciers will write their own story across our cities, just as they did across the continents of the forgotten world. But perhaps, buried within that ice, there will be one difference: a trace of awareness, a signal that we finally understood the rhythm, that we learned to live within the cycle instead of against it. The last ice will come, and with it, silence. But silence is not the end. It is the Earth's way of remembering what we tried to forget. And when the thaw returns, as it always does, the world will awaken once more, wondering who built the ruins beneath its feet. Every civilization believes it stands at the pinnacle of knowledge. But what if every age, like a wave, rises only to crash back into the sea of forgetting? What if the progress of humanity is not a line moving forward, but a spiral, endlessly revisiting the same lessons, the same hubris, the same silence? As the glaciers remind us, time is not a straight road. It is a loop. And within that loop lies the greatest mystery of all: how much of what we call discovery is, in truth, remembrance. The first clues of this circular history emerge in the shared symbols carved into stone across continents: the spiral, the serpent, the sun, motifs found in Sumerian ziggurats, Mayan temples, Celtic tombs, and Aboriginal rock art. They seem to whisper the same truth: that life, death, and renewal are bound by rhythm. Archaeologists classify these as archetypes, but perhaps they are not products of imagination at all. Perhaps they are remnants of a universal system of knowledge, a prehistoric science of time, encoded in myth after the last great reset. Each symbol, each carving, a coordinate in the forgotten language of cycles. At the center of this lost lexicon stands a symbol that transcends cultures. The circle divided into four, known variously as the medicine wheel, the solar cross, or the world wheel. It marks not only the cardinal directions, but the four ages of the world: creation, growth, decay, and rebirth. In geological terms, it mirrors the alternation between glacial and interglacial periods. The ancients may not have had our instruments, but they observed the pattern written in the stars and the seasons, in the migration of animals and the silence of the earth before the cold returned. They saw time not as progress, but as pulse. In the high desert of Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, a spiral carved into a sandstone cliff aligns with a shaft of sunlight that passes precisely through its center on the summer solstice. Archaeologists call it the Fajada Butte Sun Dagger, a celestial clock older than many written calendars. Thousands of miles away, on Malta's Gantija temples, the same solar alignments mark the equinoxes, the rebirth of light after winter. Across oceans, ancient engineers were measuring the same sky with the same intent: to predict the return of warmth, to remember the rhythm of the heavens, perhaps because they knew the cost of forgetting it. In the mythology of the Andes, Viracocha, the foam of the sea, emerges after a deluge to recreate humanity from stone. He carries a staff and a circle, symbols of time and order. He teaches the survivors the arts of civilization before departing across the ocean, promising to return. The parallels with Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, and even the Mesopotamian Enki are striking. Each appears as a bringer of light and law after the flood. Were these merely mythic archetypes born of trauma, or faint memories of teachers from a vanished age, the final emissaries of a civilization undone by ice and fire? The idea of recurring worlds was central to ancient cosmology. The Aztecs believed that the Earth had been destroyed and remade 4 times before the current age, each era ending in a different cataclysm: wind, fire, flood, and beasts. Hindu scriptures describe vast cycles called kalpas, each lasting billions of years, within which countless worlds arise and dissolve. Even Plato, in the Laws, speaks of periodic destructions by water and fire, after which civilization must begin again as children, ignorant of the past. These were not metaphors. They were observations, passed down through language that straddled myth and geology. The ancients may have lacked carbon dating, but they had memory, and memory, once encoded in story, can outlast stone. What is remarkable is how these myths mirror data emerging from modern science. Around every 100,000 years, Earth enters a deep freeze, followed by rapid warming. Within these glacial cycles lie smaller oscillations, mini ice ages, solar minima, abrupt climate events, spaced roughly every 12,000 years. The last began at the Younger Dryas. The timing between those events and the legends of global floods is uncomfortably close. Could it be that the ancients encoded the timing of cosmic catastrophes within their myths to warn future generations? If so, the warnings are beginning to resonate once again. In 2017, researchers analyzing ice cores from Greenland discovered traces of platinum coinciding with the onset of the Younger Dryas, evidence of a large extraterrestrial impact. Similar traces were found across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, suggesting a global event. The results were controversial, but they matched precisely the time frame of the Great Melt and the myths of destruction that followed. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that fragments of a disintegrating comet struck the ice sheets, triggering massive floods, fires, and sudden cooling. For early humans, or perhaps for the survivors of a forgotten civilization, the world would have appeared to die overnight. The stars themselves would have seemed to fall. If this was the Great Reset, then everything after, the rebuilding, the rise of agriculture, the myths of gods teaching men, may have been humanity's attempt to restore what was lost. But what if some remnant of the old world survived, not just in story, but in structure? Around the world, we find megalithic ruins that seem beyond the capability of their supposed builders. Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, and Sacsayhuaman in Peru, with their cyclopean stones and interlocking joints. The pyramids of Egypt, aligned to Orion's belt. The underwater city off the coast of Cuba, detected by sonar in 2001, with symmetrical structures spread across several square kilometers. These sites do not simply defy explanation. They suggest continuity, as if knowledge survived in fragments, passed like a spark from one epoch to the next. Yet, over time, those sparks dimmed. The priesthoods that inherited this knowledge turned it into secrecy and ritual. Astronomical observatories became temples, Equations became chants. Geometry became magic. The sacred was born from the scientific, and then divorced from it. The cycle of memory closed once more. What the ancients once measured in stars, later generations worshipped in symbols. And so the knowledge that could have prepared humanity for the next turning was lost in the fog of devotion. But remnants endure, hidden in plain sight. The Great Pyramid's base encodes the dimensions of the Earth with astonishing accuracy. The Mayan calendar, far from being mystical, precisely tracks astronomical cycles spanning millennia. Even the biblical ark, its proportions described in cubits, matches the ratio of stable ship design known today. These are not coincidences. They are signatures of awareness, fragments of a system that once unified geometry, astronomy, and survival. To measure the world was to understand its rhythm. To understand the rhythm was to survive its resets, and yet we stand at the threshold of another such moment. Modern climatology confirms that we are entering a period of instability unseen since the last great melt. The ice retreats, seas rise, storms intensify, and the magnetic poles drift. The same signs that preceded past cataclysms unfold before us, but this time we have technology, satellites, and global communication. For the first time in known history, humanity can witness a turning in real time. The question is not whether the cycle will continue. It always does, but whether we will recognize it as such, or dismiss it as coincidence once again. In every age, the pattern repeats. The builders rise, the knowledge accumulates, the balance tips, and the ice returns. But maybe this time, awareness itself can break the loop. Perhaps the real, lost knowledge was not about machines or energy, but about humility, the understanding that civilization must move in rhythm with the planet, not against it. Ancient myths warn not of divine punishment, but of imbalance. The Atlanteans corrupted by power, the Tower of Babel collapsing under pride, the fall of man born from disobedience to natural law. Each story ends not in annihilation, but in renewal. The survivors begin again, wiser, for a while. The evidence, the myths, the stones, all point to one truth. The earth does not destroy, it resets. And in that reset lies both loss and mercy. The cold wipes away excess, arrogance, and noise, leaving only what is essential, memory preserved in silence, waiting to be reawakened. When the thaw returns, it is up to the next generation to listen to those echoes and rebuild. That is the rhythm of the glacial ages. Forget, remember, forget again. Perhaps the real question is not what happened to the lost civilizations, but what they left for us to find. The ice may be melting, but so too are the walls between myth and science. As each layer of permafrost yields ancient DNA, ancient artifacts, ancient air, the past begins to breathe again. It is as if the planet itself is telling us, remember. Remember that you are not the first. Remember that time is not yours. Remember that the rhythm is older than your species, and it will outlast your monuments. The spiral turns once more. The glaciers recede, and with them, memory awakens. The old stories stir, of suns that fell, of oceans that rose, of teachers who came from the stars to rebuild what was lost. Whether gods or ancestors, they speak the same message. Every age is both an ending and a beginning. The ice will return. The question is, will we? As the centuries unfolded after the last great melt, humanity began to rebuild its shattered memory. Yet the reconstruction was imperfect, like piecing together a vast mosaic when half the tiles have been swept away by the tide. The stories of creation, the sacred architectures, the celestial calendars, all were fragments of something once whole. What had begun as observation and remembrance became myth and ritual. The priests and astronomers of the early civilizations, standing on the ashes of an older world, could still sense echoes of its wisdom, but could no longer trace its source. They built upward, toward the heavens, as if trying to recover what the flood had taken. In Mesopotamia, the ziggurats rose from the plains, tiered towers meant to bridge earth and sky. In Egypt, pyramids mirrored the celestial order, each side facing a cardinal direction, each chamber echoing the stars. In Mesoamerica, temples aligned with the solstice sun, while in China, the early emperors mapped their cities according to the constellations above. Everywhere, stone became language, geometry became theology. Humanity was rebuilding not only society, but memory itself, rewriting the forgotten science of cycles into monuments of faith. And yet, beneath the splendor of these early civilizations, something older still whispered. In the oldest layers of myth, the gods themselves seem weary, as though remembering another time, another fall. The Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki lamenting the destruction of the antediluvian cities. The Egyptian priests told Solon of an age when their own records had been lost to fire and flood. The Maya and the Hopi recounted that the world had been destroyed and remade multiple times. Such stories, scattered across the globe, repeat like an echo that refuses to die. The ancients were not only describing creation, they were confessing amnesia. The deeper one studies these myths, the clearer it becomes that they were less about divine intervention than about human survival. Survivors remembering fragments of knowledge too dangerous or too incomprehensible to fully express. Consider the recurring theme of forbidden knowledge, the fruit of Eden, the fire of Prometheus, the wisdom of Thoth, the language of the gods. In every version, humanity reaches too far, reclaims something long lost, and is punished for it. But what if these tales do not describe hubris, but history? What if each cycle of civilization ends not because of moral failure, but because knowledge outruns wisdom, and the planet, in its balancing rhythm, corrects the imbalance through catastrophe? If we accept that Earth's glacial eras are both natural and cyclical, then perhaps human consciousness, too, follows that same wave, awakening, rising to brilliance, collapsing, and beginning again. The ancients may have understood this intuitively. Their calendars, Mayan, Hindu, Egyptian, do not count time linearly. They loop. They fold eternity into measurable rhythm. Every era or yuga ends in dissolution, only to begin anew. The destruction of one world is the gestation of another. In the geological record, this rhythm is unmistakable. Between each interglacial period, there lies a layer of chaos, flood debris, volcanic ash, fossilized forests turned to coal. The transition is always abrupt. A world thriving with warmth and abundance is suddenly buried under centuries of ice. Yet, in that burial, seeds survive. The ice becomes both grave and womb. From it, new life eventually emerges, altered, adapted, remembering nothing. The question that lingers is whether our species carries, buried somewhere in its collective psyche, the faint imprint of those past lives, not as genetic memory, but as myth. When archaeologists excavate the ruins of ancient Sumer, They find tablets that speak of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years, reigns that stretch impossibly far into the past. Scholars dismiss them as exaggeration, but perhaps they encode something different. Not individual lifespans, but cycles of time. Each king could represent an era, an age of humanity that rose and fell before the flood reset the clock. Likewise, in Egypt, the concept of Zep Tepi, the first time, refers not to creation itself, but to a golden age that ended before the dynasties began. To the priests of Heliopolis, history was not a continuum. It was a series of awakenings, each dimmer than the last. And so, as human civilization spread again after the ice, it carried both progress and decay. The knowledge of agriculture, metallurgy, and writing flourished, but the deeper memory, the understanding of cycles, faded. Humanity began to believe in permanence. Cities rose on riverbanks, oblivious to the tides that would one day swallow them. Stone replaced memory. Ritual replaced observation. The keepers of wisdom became rulers, and the rhythm of the cosmos was replaced by the illusion of control. It is a pattern repeated in every empire, the ascent toward mastery, followed by the blindness that mastery brings. There were, however, those who remembered, not in temples, but in silence. Across millennia, the notion of secret schools, mystery traditions, and initiatory orders persisted. The Druids, the Pythagoreans, the Vedic sages, the Taoist alchemists all shared a belief that truth was cyclical, not static. They sought harmony with the changing pulse of earth and sky. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, a text whose origins vanish into myth, encapsulates this worldview, as above, so below. To understand the heavens was to understand the self, and to know that both were subject to the same laws of change. Even modern science, stripped of mysticism, is rediscovering this principle. In chaos theory, small shifts create massive consequences, cycles within cycles, patterns repeating at every scale. Climate science reveals that glacial periods follow orbital variations known as Milankovitch cycles, cosmic rhythms that govern the dance of ice and fire. Quantum physics suggests that observation itself shapes reality, as if consciousness and matter are entwined in a cosmic feedback loop. The ancients may not have known the mathematics, but they sensed the music. They felt the pulse of the planet beneath their feet and carved it into stone. The ruins we study today are not random monuments. They are points in a network, a map of memory. Many align to magnetic norths that no longer exist, as though they were built before the last geomagnetic shift. Others correspond to star positions from 12 or 13,000 years ago, the same window of time that marks the end of the Younger Dryas. What are these alignments, if not timestamps from a forgotten epoch? To decode them is to read the Earth's diary, not written in ink, but in architecture. Yet, for all our science, modern humanity remains haunted by the same blindness that doomed those before us. We mistake technological acceleration for evolution. We believe data will save us from memory loss. But the planet's rhythms are indifferent to ambition. The glaciers care nothing for silicon or circuitry. The last time sea levels rose this quickly, entire continents vanished beneath waves. Today, as ice sheets collapse once more, we stand at the precipice of déjà vu, the repetition of a story we refuse to admit we've already lived. The ancient warnings, once dismissed as superstition, now read like scientific prediction. The Hopi spoke of a time when the earth would heat and shake, when the sky would be filled with webs of light, and when humanity would face the choice to renew or perish. The Hindu texts describe the Kali Yuga, an age of disconnection and technological arrogance, ending in purification by fire and flood. Even the Christian revelation speaks of a new heaven and a new earth, born through destruction. Different languages, same pattern. The reset is not punishment, it is renewal. Perhaps that is why so many ancient monuments are oriented toward the stars, not as idols, but as clocks. They measure the slow precession of Earth's axis, tracking the 26,000-year wobble that marks the ages of humanity. When the sun rises in a new zodiacal house, the ancients believed, a new epoch begins. The last great transition occurred when the sun moved from Leo to Cancer, around the time the glaciers melted. Now, as it shifts from Pisces to Aquarius, the cycle closes once again. Whether myth or astronomy, the timing aligns. It is said that civilizations fall not because of ignorance, but because of forgetting. Knowledge decays when it is divorced from meaning. The ancients built to remember, we build to conquer. They watched the skies for balance, we watch them for exploitation. The difference is subtle, but decisive. To live in rhythm is to endure. To defy the rhythm is to vanish. The ice does not forgive defiance, it simply waits. And yet there is hope in the waiting. For even if the glaciers return, they will not come to destroy, they will come to preserve. Beneath their silence, our ruins, our art, and perhaps even our data will sleep, waiting for the next awakening. And when the thaw comes again, as it always does, a new humanity will find our traces and wonder who we were. They will read our myths as we now read the Epic of Gilgamesh. They will decode our satellites as we decode the stars. They will see the same pattern and ask the same question. How much did they know? How much did they forget? Every cycle is a test of memory. The ice erases, but it also records. We are both its victims and its authors. The glacial eras do not end the story of civilization. They turn the page. And though we cannot escape the cycle, we can choose how we are remembered within it. Perhaps that is the secret the ancients tried to leave for us. Not how to survive the next cataclysm, but how to remain human through it, to build with reverence, to think in centuries, not years, to see the sacred in the scientific and the eternal in the transient. The ice will come again, and when it does, it will bring silence. But silence is not void. It is the breath before the next creation, the pause in which memory prepares to speak once more. And when it does, the earth will remember us, not through our machines, but through the rhythm we either honored or ignored. There is a strange poetry in the way the planet forgets. The ice erases yet preserves. The ocean buries yet protects. What we call lost may not be gone at all, only sealed, waiting for the right conditions to awaken. In every glacial layer, there are memories suspended like dreams, seeds that still sprout after 40,000 years, spores that bloom when exposed to air, microbes that begin to breathe again after a lifetime in darkness. If life itself can awaken from ice, could memory do the same? Could consciousness, collective, ancient, buried deep in myth, resurface when the world turns once more toward the sun? To imagine that possibility is to confront a terrifying beauty, that the past may not be past, but dormant. The Earth's own systems seem to remember their rhythms even after extinction, Forests regrow along ancestral lines. Rivers reclaim their ancient courses. Magnetic poles wander, but always find balance. And humanity, too, seems bound to that pulse. We rebuild cities where others once stood, often without knowing. We erect temples over ruins, unaware that beneath our foundations lies the same geometry, the same stones rearranged by new hands. Memory, it seems, is not an accident. It is a law. Consider the uncanny persistence of sacred geography. From the Andes to the Himalayas, from the Nile to the Mississippi, ancient civilizations built upon energy-rich intersections, places where magnetic anomalies, fault lines, or telluric currents converge. Modern science can now detect these geophysical patterns, but ancient builders somehow sensed them. They aligned their monuments to the solstice sunrise, to planetary conjunctions, to the invisible pathways of energy that pulse through the crust of the earth. Why? Perhaps because these were not mere religious gestures, but an act of synchronization, a way to anchor human consciousness to the planet's rhythm. If one aligns structure, ritual, and mind to the cycles of earth and sky, perhaps memory itself can endure beyond catastrophe. This idea was central to the mystery traditions of old, that the world was not random, but harmonic. Pythagoras called it musica universalis, the music of the spheres, in which every celestial motion corresponds to a note in a cosmic scale. The Egyptians encoded it in the ratio of their temples, the Mayans in the intervals of their calendars. In India, the concept of Nada Brahma declared that the universe itself was sound, vibration frozen into form. These were not metaphors. They were reminders that the cosmos speaks in rhythm, and to forget that rhythm is to fall out of tune with creation. What if the fall of civilizations, the great collapses, the unexplained disappearances are not just accidents of history, but dissonance? What if every time humanity grows too detached from the natural harmonies, too absorbed in its own noise, the Earth resets the scale? Ice ages, volcanic winters, sudden droughts, each could be seen not as punishment, but as correction. The Earth is not cruel, it is precise. As glacial cycles come and go, so too do the ages of consciousness. In esoteric traditions, these are the great years, vast arcs of spiritual and physical evolution linked to the precession of the equinoxes. Each age brings a certain light, one of faith, one of reason, one of power, one of silence. The ancients may have understood these as shifts not only in stars, but in the human mind. When the heavens tilt, so does perception. The myths that follow, the floods, the fires, the descent of gods, are reflections of these inner tremors, playing out on the stage of the world. If that is true, then we are not simply living in history. We are participating in a memory returning. The modern world, with its obsession for rediscovery, archaeology, and ancient knowledge, may be experiencing the early stages of remembrance. As the ice melts, both literally and metaphorically, the hidden archives of the earth begin to surface. We find ruins beneath the sea, forests beneath the glaciers, and within ourselves a hunger for origins we cannot explain. The resurgence of interest in forgotten civilizations, ancient energy systems, and cosmic cycles is not coincidence. It is resonance. Something buried within the human psyche is stirring. Science, despite its skepticism, seems to follow the same path. Each new discovery brings us closer to what the ancients already intuited. Quantum entanglement mirrors the concept of universal unity. Genetic memory echoes reincarnation. Planetary resonance validates the ancient belief that celestial alignments influence Earth's climate and magnetism. Even the digital web we have built, a global network of information, reflects the same archetypal desire as the temples of old: to preserve knowledge across ages, to survive the next forgetting. But data, unlike stone, is fragile. It depends on electricity, stability, and time, all of which the next cataclysm would dissolve. The irony is profound. In trying to preserve everything, we may once again lose all. The ancients built to endure the freeze. Their monuments were not vanity, but vaults. Massive, immovable, and aligned to eternity, they were designed to outlast ice, flood, and fire. Some researchers believe the Sphinx may be one such marker, a sentinel facing east, aligned not only with the rising sun, but with the slow precession of the heavens. Its erosion patterns suggest it is older than the dynasties that restored it, possibly dating to the reigns of a climate long vanished. If true, then it stands as a message across epochs, a memory of when the world last turned cold. There are others. The Great Pyramid encodes the dimensions of the Earth and the ratio of the solar year within its proportions. The Temple of Angkor Wat mirrors the cycles of the Hindu cosmos. The city of Teotihuacan aligns perfectly to celestial nodes 15.5 degrees east of true north, matching not our current pole, but one from an earlier age. These were not coincidences of devotion, they were continuity. When language and empire fail, geometry endures. Stone speaks in numbers that even time cannot distort. It is as if the builders of old knew that the next civilization, the one that would awaken after the freeze, would need clues, not doctrine. They did not write, "This is who we were." They carved ratios, alignments, and myths that could outlast destruction. And in doing so, they extended memory beyond the limits of their age. We, in turn, stand upon those same stones and repeat their error. We admire their monuments, but forget their message. We measure their precision, but ignore their humility. We see architecture where they saw synchronization. Our skyscrapers rise like ziggurats, but their foundations hum with imbalance. We no longer build to align with the heavens, we build to defy gravity. Perhaps that is why the rhythm has begun to tremble again. In Antarctica, satellites have detected unusual magnetic anomalies beneath the ice, ovals of density that suggest vast structures buried for millennia. In Greenland, melting glaciers have revealed remnants of ancient vegetation, frozen since before the last ice age. In the Arctic permafrost, human tools and animal bones appear in layers once believed untouched by civilization. Each discovery pushes history further back, blurring the boundary between myth and geology. The deeper we dig, the more the earth seems to whisper, "You have been here before." The great paradox of the glacial cycle is that destruction and revelation arrive together. When ice retreats, it returns the world's secrets. When it advances, it seals them again. Humanity lives in the narrow window between an age of remembering. Perhaps that is why so many of our myths revolve around dawns and dusks, beginnings and ends. We exist in twilight, always emerging from one forgetting, always descending into another. But there is still a question left unanswered. The same one that haunted Plato and Pythagoras, the same one modern physicists still circle around. Is this cycle inevitable, or can consciousness itself alter it? If the universe is vibration, and vibration responds to harmony, then perhaps memory, True memory, shared and reverent, can shift the rhythm. If enough of humanity remembers that it has lived and died by the same mistake countless times, perhaps the next turning will not require catastrophe. The glaciers may still come, but maybe they will find a world that remembers how to endure without erasure. To remember, however, is not merely to know facts. It is to feel continuity. It is to look upon the rising sun and see not just light, but time, the same light that warmed forgotten continents, the same warmth that will one day thaw our ruins. It is to see ourselves not as masters of nature, but as chapters in its long, cyclical book. That perspective, once common, is now radical. And yet it is returning. In the quiet movements of rewilding, of studying ancient farming techniques, of reviving sacred architecture, humanity is beginning, perhaps unknowingly, to harmonize again. The planet responds. Forests grow where they were once raised. Species thought extinct reappear. The ice pauses. The rhythm softens. It is fragile, but it is real. The earth has always been a mirror, reflecting not what we build, but what we believe. The last civilizations left behind stone and myth. We will leave behind glass and code. The medium may differ, but the message remains. Remember. When the next travelers of time, whoever or whatever they may be, uncover our traces, they will see our satellites frozen in orbit, our cities half buried under snow, our monuments facing constellations that have shifted once more. And perhaps, if we have done well, they will understand that we, too, once listened, that we tried, before the silence, to keep the rhythm. The ice will come, as it always does. But perhaps this time, the earth will not be alone in remembering. Perhaps this time we will freeze with our eyes open, aware, waiting, knowing that memory, like life, never truly dies. In the quiet architecture of Earth's history, there is a repeating pattern so immense it almost escapes perception. Civilizations, like seasons, rise from the thaw, flourish under brief warmth, and then vanish under returning frost. Yet each age leaves behind echoes, fragments of knowledge, geometry, and myth that the next rediscovery mistakes for miracles. The cycle itself may be cruel, but it is also profoundly intelligent. It ensures that what is worth remembering survives, even if buried in symbols rather than sentences. The question is no longer whether the cycle exists, but why it must. Why must every ascent of human understanding end in silence, and every silence be broken again by the same questions? Who built before, what was lost, and what waits to return? Perhaps the answer lies not only in nature, but in consciousness. The glacial ages may not be merely environmental resets. They may be psychological ones. Each cataclysm, each flood or freeze, wipes clean not only the surface of the earth, but also the collective human mind. Myths from every culture hint at this, at memory itself being rewritten after every world-ending event. In the Vedas, after each pralaya or cosmic dissolution, humanity forgets its origin and must be retaught the sacred sciences. In Plato's dialogues, the Egyptian priests tell Solon that after every catastrophe, humans begin again as children. It is not that the past is hidden from us, it is that our minds are designed to forget, so that the next creation can emerge unburdened. The ice is not just a destroyer of civilization, it is the anesthesia of time. This notion, that forgetting is part of the planet's design, haunts the edges of both science and myth. Neurologists now understand that memory is not a permanent record, but a living process that renews itself each time it is recalled. The act of remembering reshapes the memory itself, subtly altering it. Perhaps the Earth functions the same way. Each time it rebuilds life after destruction, it rewrites the past slightly, improving, simplifying, correcting. Evolution may be not a march forward, but a refinement through cycles of amnesia. The ancients may have sensed this. Their myths do not portray the deluge as final. They portray it as cleansing. The flood washes away impurity, ignorance, or corruption, preparing the world for renewal. In a sense, they accepted what modern humanity resists, that destruction and creation are twins. The ice that buries the past also preserves the seeds of the future. That is why so many ancient rites centered on death and rebirth, descent and ascent, winter and spring. The initiates of Eleusis reenacted the dying of the earth and the resurrection of its hidden grain. The Egyptians weighed the heart against the feather, believing that only through surrender to the cycle could the soul progress. Even the Christian mystery of resurrection, in its most esoteric form, mirrors this older archetype, a promise that beyond every death lies another dawn. If the planet's rhythm includes forgetting, then perhaps the only form of immortality available to civilization is through pattern, not permanence. Knowledge cannot survive unchanged, but the pattern of its rediscovery can. The builders of the megaliths may have known this. They encoded not facts, but frameworks, geometric truths, alignments, ratios, structures that could be rediscovered by anyone who observed the heavens with the same devotion. The great year, the precession of the equinoxes, the solar and lunar cycles. These are not inventions. They are rediscoveries. The same cosmic mathematics reappears in every epoch, as if inscribed in the architecture of human perception itself. When we look at the ruins scattered across continents, the pyramids, the stone circles, the star maps carved into cave walls, we are not just seeing the fingerprints of lost civilizations, we are witnessing the persistence of pattern. Across time, through ice and flood, humanity rediscovers the same truths again and again. The same geometry governs galaxies and atoms. The same ratios sculpt seashells and cathedrals. What the ancients called sacred harmony, we now call physics. The terminology changes, but the melody endures. The cycle, it seems, is not punishment. It is pedagogy. The universe teaches in repetitions. Yet humanity resists the lesson. Each new age of enlightenment convinces itself it is the first. We build technologies to escape nature, to dominate the elements, to outlast the ice, forgetting that the cycle is not external, but internal. The true catastrophe of each collapse is not the loss of structures, but the loss of humility. The more we rise, the less we remember that we are guests here. When balance breaks, the correction comes, first as warning, then as storm, then as silence. We may already be hearing the first warnings now. The Arctic's ancient ice, melting faster than any model predicted, releases air trapped for hundreds of millennia. The breath of worlds long gone. Inside those bubbles are stories, spikes of carbon, traces of cosmic dust, microscopic fossils of vanished ecosystems. Each layer tells the same story: warmth, expansion, overreach, collapse, freeze. The patterns in the ice core are eerily similar to the economic and ecological graphs of our time. Peaks and falls, growth and crash. It is as if we are tracing the same heartbeat that has pulsed for hundreds of thousands of years, now accelerating toward another turning. But amid that acceleration, something different is stirring, a kind of meta-memory. For the first time, a civilization is conscious of the cycle while still within it. We have the data, the myths, the ruins, the climate models, fragments from every previous fall. The very act of connecting them is unprecedented. It is as though the Earth, through us, is trying to remember itself. The glaciers record, or the scientists read, the poets interpret, the myths reawaken. Perhaps that synthesis, that global recollection, is the real purpose of our age. Still, memory is fragile. Awareness alone does not guarantee survival. The ancients may have known the pattern too, but knowledge without reverence is sterile. To remember the cycle is not enough. One must live within it. That is the secret encoded in the oldest philosophies, Taoism, Hermeticism, indigenous cosmologies, all teaching balance, rhythm, moderation. To move with the current, not against it. To build with the understanding that what endures is not structure, but alignment. Modern science is beginning to echo these ancient intuitions. Earth systems theory describes the planet as a self-regulating organism, a Gaia that maintains equilibrium through feedback. When imbalance grows too great, the system shifts abruptly to restore balance. Ice ages and warm periods are its breath. We are living in one of those breaths, and our every action, every forest burned, every glacier melted, alters the rhythm. The question is whether we are harmonizing or accelerating the next reset. Some scientists speak of a coming climate tipping point, a phrase eerily similar to the thresholds described in myth. The Hopi called it the Great Purification. The Norse saw it as Ragnarok. The Hindus named it the end of Kali Yuga, an age of forgetting, ending in fire and water. To the ancients, these were not prophecies of doom, but inevitabilities of renewal. The cycle was not meant to be stopped, but understood. Yet humanity's current trajectory, its belief that it can out-engineer the planet, reveals that we still struggle to accept impermanence. And yet, not all signs point to despair. In the melting permafrost of Siberia, archaeologists have unearthed seeds of long-extinct plants, which scientists have successfully germinated after tens of thousands of years. Life remembers. The genetic code, silent but unbroken, waits for its cue. In the ice of Greenland, dormant bacteria revive and begin to replicate under the warmth of human breath. Even our technology mirrors this instinct. Digital archives in orbit, lunar libraries etched on sapphire disks designed to outlast us. The impulse to preserve is as old as the impulse to build. Whether through stone, myth, or silicon, the same desire endures, to carry memory across the coming silence. Perhaps that is the true task of this civilization. Not to prevent the cycle, but to plant knowledge deeply enough that it survives it. To create artifacts, stories, and truths that can be rediscovered when the thaw returns. We may not save everything, but we can save the pattern. To remember that everything that dies on this planet does so in service of renewal. In the end, maybe that is what the ancients wanted us to understand, that the ice is not our enemy, but our editor. It removes the noise, the arrogance, the excess, leaving only what matters: proportion, rhythm, truth. When the next civilization uncovers our ruins, they will not need our names. The geometry of what we leave will speak for us. Our alignment with the stars, our symmetry with the earth, our understanding of the cycle, these will tell them who we were. The great forgetting will come again, as it always has. But if we remember how to plant our knowledge in the patterns of the world, in geometry, in resonance, in myth, then the next dawn will not begin from zero. It will begin from memory. And perhaps for the first time, the earth itself will awaken not into silence, but into song, the music of everything that has ever been, finally remembering its own tune. When the glaciers retreat, they reveal more than just land. They uncover mirrors. Beneath their silence lie questions that reach beyond archaeology or myth, not simply what happened before us, but why it keeps happening. Why do civilizations, no matter how advanced, always seem to reach the same threshold of brilliance, imbalance, and collapse? What invisible rhythm orchestrates the rise and fall of both mountains and empires? Perhaps it begins with memory itself. Human beings are creatures of pattern, yet also prisoners of forgetfulness. Our biology is built on short cycles, generations, seasons, lifetimes, while the earth breathes in scales too vast for the mind to hold. When a cataclysm takes centuries to unfold, we call it eternity. When it happens overnight, we call it myth. But to the planet, both are the same gesture, a recalibration of balance. The glaciers move not in malice, but in music, flowing to a tempo measured in millennia. Humanity simply lives too quickly to hear the full song. Ancient cultures may have grasped this truth in ways we've lost. They didn't separate time from consciousness or nature from divinity. To them, the world was alive, not metaphorically, but literally. Mountains had spirits. Rivers remembered. The sky was an organism that breathed light. This worldview, dismissed by modern science as animism, may have been less superstition than perception, a way of feeling the planet's pulse directly. Those who lived in rhythm with it endured. Those who didn't vanished. Every ruin, every legend is a fossil of that dialogue between humanity and the earth. Consider how myths encode geological truths. The Maori speak of a time when ice mountains walked and the sea swallowed the land. The Inuit remember the sky shaking and rivers reversing. In South America, the Quechua tell of a world of giants destroyed by floods and frozen rain. Across the world, the same language repeats: fire, water, sky, silence. For millennia, scientists dismissed these as primitive imaginations. But now, with ice cores, sediment samples, and paleoclimate data, we see how precise these oral records truly are. The sky shaking might have been an asteroid impact. The frozen rain, an ash winter from a supervolcano. The giants may have been Ice Age megafauna. The ancients didn't misunderstand reality. They mythologized it to preserve it. That act of myth-making, turning fact into story, may be the oldest form of resilience we possess. Unlike stone, story survives mobility. It travels across generations, carrying the pulse of memory when everything material is lost. In that sense, myths are not primitive religion, but encrypted archives, the portable libraries of the pre-cataclysmic world. When the floods came, words could float where cities could not. This is why the same myths recur in civilizations that had no contact with each other. Floods, fire, sky gods, star travelers, these are not coincidences. They are collective memories resurfacing through language. Every time humanity rebuilds, these archetypes return, like sediment layers rising with each geological upheaval. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious, but perhaps it is even more literal, not psychological but biological, encoded in the DNA that has survived every extinction. Each of us carries, within our cells, the memories of every survival before us. Our genomes are living fossils. Modern science has begun to glimpse this continuity. Epigenetics shows that trauma and adaptation can be passed through generations, imprinted in genes. The fear of floods, the reverence for stars, the instinct to rebuild after ruin, these may not just be cultural, they may be evolutionary. Our species remembers through behavior what it cannot hold in mind. That is why, after every disaster, we plant again, map again, build again. The impulse to restore pattern is stronger than the fear of loss. The glaciers erase, but life redraws. If the human story is cyclical, perhaps it is because consciousness itself mirrors the planet's rhythm. Every rise in complexity, biological, social, or technological, coincides with a corresponding risk of imbalance. The higher the order, the greater the entropy required to reset it. The ice ages may be Earth's immune response to excess, a cooling fever that restores equilibrium. Just as the body uses fever to purge infection, the planet uses ice to purge imbalance. And yet, within that destruction lies creation. New coastlines, new climates, new species. Catastrophe is not the opposite of life. It is its engine. The ancients might have understood this intuitively. Their gods were not simply benevolent or malevolent. They were forces of balance. Shiva both destroys and creates. Quetzalcoatl is both serpent and wind, chaos and order. Even Yahweh, in early scripture, creates the flood not out of cruelty, but to cleanse the world of corruption. The duality of divine nature, creator and destroyer, is the reflection of a deeper law, that everything which endures must renew itself through change. The ice does not choose, it acts according to necessity. Humanity is the only element in this equation that resists, and resistance, in this cosmic context, is the beginning of forgetfulness. Each time we believe we have conquered nature, we lose the memory of how to live within it. The builders of Atlantis, the architects of Babel, the empires that rose on rivers soon to shift, all believed they were eternal. They turned sacred geometry into weaponized architecture, harmony into hierarchy. They mistook understanding for ownership. And when the earth rebalanced, they interpreted it as wrath instead of correction. Today, that same mistake repeats on a planetary scale. We measure progress by consumption, not continuity. We call it civilization, but it is simply another experiment in imbalance. Satellites circle above melting poles. Oceans choke on memory. We have built an age of mirrors, endless data, reflection without depth, yet the same ancient rhythm hums beneath it all. The glaciers retreat, but they are not defeated. They are waiting, as they always have, for the next breath inward. And still, there is beauty in that inevitability, for even as the ice advances, it preserves our echoes. Archaeologists in future ages, or whatever intelligence follows us, will find the traces we leave in deep time. Glass turned to crystal, metal fused with stone, the faint radio hum of extinct constellations of satellites. They will wonder, as we do about the builders before us, whether we understood the rhythm or merely danced to it. Perhaps, like the civilizations before us, we are not meant to escape the cycle, only to remember it better each time. Each turn of the spiral brings greater awareness, even if the structures perish. The ancients left stone. We leave signal. The next world may inherit neither directly, but the pattern, the underlying code, may endure. The universe, it seems, learns through repetition. And perhaps consciousness, the most fragile of its creations, is the way it remembers. The most haunting thought is that this might not be Earth's first experiment with sentience. Geological evidence suggests multiple epochs where conditions could have supported intelligent life, long before humans. Silicon signatures, radioactive anomalies, and sudden carbon spikes hint at civilizations erased beyond fossilization. Some scientists, like Gavin Schmidt of NASA, call this the Silurian hypothesis. The idea that if an industrial civilization existed millions of years ago, geological processes would have wiped almost all evidence of it. We would not know it ever lived. The Earth has had many chances to think, to create, to forget. We may simply be its latest memory. If that is true, then perhaps evolution itself is not linear but recursive, an echo chamber where intelligence rises again and again, each time starting closer to remembering the last. Humanity, then, might not be the first to seek meaning in the stars, only the first to realize that the stars are remembering too. The universe could be its own archive, each glacial cycle a reset in a cosmic feedback loop of awareness. The ancients captured this intuition in the symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. It is not a symbol of destruction, but of eternity, the end feeding the beginning. Every ice age is a new coil in that cosmic serpent, every rebirth a continuation of the same consciousness. To break the cycle is not to escape it, but to understand it completely, to live so harmoniously with the rhythm that the reset becomes evolution, not erasure. That may be the ultimate lesson buried in the ice, that remembering is not about clinging to the past, but about carrying its harmony forward. The glacial ages, with all their destruction, are acts of mercy, opportunities to start over without the burden of corruption. The ancients called them divine purifications. Science calls them climatic feedbacks. Both are right. The Earth is not against us. It is teaching us to listen. In the stillness of the next freeze, when cities are gone and oceans are locked in silence, the memory will remain, in code, in ice, in the faint hum of atoms remembering warmth. And when the thaw returns, as it always does, something will rise again, new, curious, and searching for its own origins. It will find our traces, our monuments, our myths. It will wonder if we too once knew the cycle and forgot. The answer will lie not in our ruins, but in our rhythm, in whether we lived in harmony or defiance. The glaciers do not judge, but they remember. They always remember. And their return is not an ending, but a reminder that forgetting is never total, and that the song of the earth, though silenced for an age, will always find its voice again. The further one studies the long memory of the earth, the clearer it becomes that the story of humanity is not an ascent, but a rhythm. Each epoch of civilization rises like a melody, building toward brilliance before dissolving back into silence. The ice, the fire, the flood, they are not random catastrophes, but the rests between notes, the pauses that allow the next song to form. What we call history might be nothing more than the Earth's way of keeping time, and perhaps consciousness, fragile, luminous, and endlessly curious, is the instrument through which the planet learns to listen to itself. The ancients seemed to understand this. In their stories, destruction was never the end. It was always the threshold to renewal. The flood, Ragnarok, the fall of Atlantis, the descent of Kali Yuga, all speak of a cycle that must complete itself before harmony can return. The survivors in these tales are never victors. They are witnesses, carriers of fragments who plant seeds for the next beginning. The role of the survivor is not to conquer, but to remember. Archaeology, in its quiet way, confirms the continuity of these witnesses. After every global collapse, be it the Younger Dryas freeze, the volcanic winter of 535 CE, or the medieval climate shift, there is evidence of resurgence, of rebuilding. The ruins never mark an end, they mark a threshold. From Göbekli Tepe to Mesopotamia, from the Indus to the Andes, humanity rises from the ashes of forgetting with uncanny speed. The same technologies reappear: agriculture, stonework, celestial mapping. It is as though, somewhere within our collective memory, the blueprint persists. When the world resets, we reach instinctively for the old designs, like a dream half remembered. Perhaps that is why each new civilization appears to awaken, already knowing where the stars are. The Babylonians charted the heavens with precision that still astonishes astronomers. The Mayans tracked Venus across centuries without telescopes. The builders of Nabta Playa aligned stone circles to Orion long before Egypt's first pyramid. Such knowledge should have taken millennia to accumulate, yet it appears suddenly, fully formed, like memory resurfacing after amnesia. It is not progress, it is recollection. If the pattern holds, then what we call modern science is only the latest rediscovery of an ancient awareness. The laws of thermodynamics, quantum entanglement, even the understanding of fractal geometry, all echo principles known, in symbolic form, to earlier ages. As above, so below, wrote the Hermetic philosophers. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Today, we express it as holographic theory, or as the idea that the universe is self-similar at all scales. The ancients sang it in myth. We calculate it in equations. Both are ways of describing the same truth, that everything is connected through rhythm and resonance. Yet, in every age, this understanding seems to decay into arrogance. The knowledge that once harmonized humanity with the cosmos becomes a tool for domination. Ancient texts warn of this pattern. The Popol Vuh tells of humans who learned too much of the gods' power and were blinded for their pride. The Book of Enoch speaks of watchers who gave forbidden knowledge to mortals, leading to ruin. In these stories, forbidden does not mean evil, it means incomplete, knowledge without balance, light without grounding. The flood, the fire, the ice, these are not punishments but corrections, restoring equilibrium between knowing and being. Modern civilization, for all its brilliance, walks the same edge. We can map galaxies and split atoms, yet we have lost the wisdom of limits. We confuse information with understanding, speed with progress. We look into the void of space and see emptiness, not reflection, but the cycle will not wait for enlightenment. The earth, patient as stone, continues its rhythm. Ice sheets melt, magnetic poles drift, ocean currents falter. Each data point, each temperature anomaly is a measure of imbalance, the first tremors of another great correction. And yet, perhaps for the first time, humanity has the capacity to recognize the pattern while still inside it. We can read the isotopic signatures of past cataclysms. We can trace the exact moment when climates shifted and species vanished. We can even predict, within probabilities, the tipping points that precede collapse. To know this is both privilege and burden. For what good is awareness without wisdom? We have inherited the same position as the survivors of the last age, the witnesses, except this time, The witnesses are everyone. Still, awareness alone might change the rhythm. The ancients did not have data. They had myth. We have data, but we have lost the mythic connection that gave meaning to it. To bridge the two may be the key to remembering rightly. If we could once again see the earth not as an object, but as a being, alive, cyclical, expressive, we might finally learn to move with its breath instead of against it. Perhaps that is the real test of this era, to see if consciousness can harmonize with the cycle before it is reset. Everywhere, small signs suggest that this harmonization has begun. Humanity is slowly rediscovering what it means to belong to time. Movements to restore forests, to rewild landscapes, to honor indigenous knowledge. These are not sentimental regressions. They are acts of remembrance. They recall an ancient rhythm buried under centuries of noise. They remind us that sustainability is not innovation, but memory. The memory of how to live as part of the planet's breathing. Even the revival of ancient technologies, passive architecture, stone aqueducts, solar alignments, mirrors this return. The ancients built in rhythm with the sun and wind. Modern engineers are rediscovering why. The temples of Karnak and Chaco Canyon were not only sacred, they were functional climate models designed to regulate heat and light. The line between science and spirituality was never meant to divide. It was meant to describe two ways of perceiving the same law. When viewed through this lens, the glacial eras are not interruptions in progress, but intervals in a longer symphony. Each ice age erases what is unnecessary and refines what endures. It is evolution on the scale of consciousness. What survives the freeze is not the strongest or the most advanced, but the most attuned. The mammoth fell, the wolf adapted, and the human remembered. Memory is the true currency of survival. Perhaps this is why we dream so obsessively of origins, of lost continents, vanished temples, the golden age before the fall. These dreams are not nostalgia. They are cellular memories, surfacing through art and imagination. Every myth of Atlantis, every story of Lemuria or Hyperborea is a psychological tremor, an echo from before the last silence. The human soul, it seems, does not forget easily. It sings its longing for wholeness through generations. Science may one day confirm what mythology has whispered for millennia, that consciousness is not local, not personal, but planetary. That memory extends beyond neurons into matter itself. The quartz in the mountains, the iron in the core, the water in the oceans, all hold resonance, storing the vibrations of every age. The planet remembers through its materials. We are simply the temporary interpreters of its song. If that is true, then the next step for humanity is not conquest, but translation, to listen more deeply. To read the strata not just for data, but for meaning. To understand that each layer of ice, each fossilized ripple, is a verse in the planet's autobiography. To build not in defiance of nature, but in chorus with it. If we could achieve that, if our cities aligned again with the pulse of the earth, perhaps the next ice would not come as erasure, but as rest. The ancients called this ideal the Golden Age, not a time of wealth or perfection, but of equilibrium. When heaven and earth were aligned, when humans walked in rhythm with the seasons. In Greek myth, the Golden Age ended when humanity grew restless, when it forgot gratitude and sought power. Since then, every age has been a descent toward complexity and distance. But the golden age may not be lost. It may be cyclical too, the returning balance after every storm. Perhaps the next one waits beyond the crisis we call modernity. The glaciers, after all, are not final. They advance, they retreat, they breathe. They do not destroy memory. They distill it. Beneath the frozen miles of Antarctica, scientists have found air bubbles that hold ancient atmospheres, the breath of long-dead forests, the scent of ancient rain. The ice remembers everything. One day, when it melts again, that memory will return to the sea and from the sea to the air. And those who come after us, whether human or something new, will inhale the stories we leave behind. Maybe that is the real immortality, not to be eternal, but to be remembered by the earth itself, to become part of its rhythm, part of its great breathing, to accept that our monuments will fall, our data will fade, our words will dissolve, but the essence of what we've learned will enter the planet's bloodstream, encoded in stone and water and wind. When the next civilization rises from the thaw, it will find us in the layers, in the isotopes, the patterns, the myths that refuse to die. It will not know our names, but it will know our harmony or our dissonance. The glaciers will decide which, and when they do, they will whisper the same message they have carried through eons, that every end is rehearsal, and every silence is memory preparing to sing again. There comes a moment in every cycle when the silence becomes unbearable, when the earth itself seems to hold its breath, and the old rhythm hovers between one note and the next. In that stillness, something extraordinary happens. Memory awakens. The glaciers pause, the oceans settle, and for a fleeting heartbeat of geological time, consciousness looks backward and forward at once. It sees the full spiral, the ages of ice and fire, the rise and fall of worlds, and it understands that everything lost was never truly gone. It was only sleeping. Perhaps that is where we stand now, in that liminal pause between forgetting and remembering. The modern world, with all its noise and brilliance, has reached the edge of its reflection. We have mapped the stars, split the atom, and decoded the genome. But we are still searching for the one thing that has always eluded us: continuity. We want to know who we are, but the answer lies deeper than history, deeper even than biology. It lies in the memory of the earth itself, in the layers of stone and ice that have witnessed all that we have been and all that we will be again. To study those layers is to read the oldest scripture. The sediments, the fossils, the isotopes. They are not relics of the past, but instructions for the future. Each one tells the same story. When balance is lost, renewal follows. When hubris rises, ice descends. The pattern is merciless, but not cruel. It is, in a strange and sacred sense, compassionate. For without the pause of winter, there can be no spring. Without erasure, there can be no space for remembering anew. The ancients may have known this more deeply than we do. Their rituals were not attempts to avoid catastrophe, but to synchronize with it, to dance within the rhythm rather than against it. The Egyptians celebrated the yearly flooding of the Nile as both destruction and rebirth. The Druids honored the solstices not as opposites, but as mirrors. The Vedic sages spoke of pralaya, the dissolution that gives birth to creation. Even the early Christians, in their hidden mysticism, saw apocalypse not as annihilation, but as unveiling. The end was never the end. It was the revealing of what had always been hidden. And so, as the modern world trembles under the weight of its own creation, Melting ice, rising seas, shifting skies. Perhaps we are witnessing not the end of civilization, but the threshold of remembrance. The data we gather, the warnings we broadcast, the crises we endure, all of it might be the Earth's way of forcing us to remember what was forgotten, that we are not separate from its cycles, but expressions of them. The same force that carved the glaciers carved our minds. The same rhythm that shapes the tides shapes our dreams. To remember this is to return to alignment. Yet alignment requires humility, a quality nearly extinct in the modern age. We are taught to conquer, not to coexist, to innovate, not to listen. Our progress has been a long escape from the natural order, and now, at the height of our dominion, we find ourselves circling back to its beginning. Technology, once meant to free us from nature, is becoming a way to understand it again. Artificial intelligence models the complexity of ecosystems. Quantum physics rediscovers ancient mysticism. Neuroscience maps the mind as a microcosm of the cosmos. In trying to transcend the Earth, we have rediscovered it. The circle closes once more. But the question remains, will we remember in time? Will we hear the music beneath the noise before the ice returns to conduct its next great silence? Because it will return. It always does. The Earth's orbital cycles guarantee it, whether in centuries or millennia. The glaciers are patient. They have all the time in the world. What they do not have is our awareness, the small, flickering light of consciousness that can choose to listen. That light may be the only thing capable of breaking the unconscious repetition of destruction and renewal. If humanity is to survive this next turning, it must become the memory of the Earth itself, the self-awareness of a planet that has learned to see its own reflection. That means more than preserving knowledge in data or archives. It means living in a way that keeps memory alive in motion, in balance, in reverence. The ancients encoded their wisdom in stone and myth, because they knew it would outlast their bodies. We, too, must find a medium that can carry our understanding through the next winter. It may not be digital. It may be something simpler, an alignment of consciousness, a shared rhythm between people and planet that cannot be erased by ice or time. Already, small signs of this awakening appear like green shoots through the snow. Scientists speak of Earth systems and feedback loops, echoing what indigenous elders have taught for centuries, that the planet is a living web. Architects design buildings that breathe with the wind. Farmers follow lunar cycles again. Even the language of spirituality and science, once divided, begins to merge, both seeking harmony rather than control. It is as if humanity, after centuries of blindness, is beginning to open its eyes in the dark. Still, awareness alone is not enough. The cycles of the past remind us that knowledge without humility leads only to greater forgetting. The civilizations that vanished, Sumer, Egypt, the Maya, the empires of ice, all fell not because they lacked brilliance, but because they mistook mastery for meaning. They built monuments to themselves instead of to the rhythm that sustains all things. If we repeat that error, the coming silence will be total. The ice will not punish, but it will erase. Yet perhaps, for the first time, the possibility exists to remember differently, to end the cycle not by halting it, but by harmonizing with it. To understand that renewal need not always come through destruction. Consciousness may have evolved enough to choose a softer form of transformation, one of balance, restoration, and reverence. That choice, however, requires surrender, a letting go of the illusion of permanence. The future will not belong to those who conquer the earth, but to those who remember they are part of it. The ice, the flood, the flame, all these are languages. The earth speaks through them, and what it says again and again is simple: balance. The message was carved into every temple, every mandala, every myth of cyclical time. It is the truth we keep rediscovering and then forgetting. Every glacial era is a cosmic reminder, a breath of correction, a chance to begin again with cleaner hands. To fear it is to misunderstand it. The glaciers are not our end, they are our mirror. Imagine a future far beyond the next silence. The ice has melted again. A new dawn breaks over continents reshaped by time. A new species, or perhaps a new kind of human, walks the thawing ground. They find fragments of our cities, traces of our satellites, myths of our machines. And somewhere, in a preserved vault or a carved monument or a story carried through the ages, they find a single truth we left behind: that everything moves in circles, that the end is only another beginning. They will not call us gods or fools. They will see us as we truly were, children of the cycle, born of light and ice, trying to understand the rhythm that made us. And perhaps, in their remembering, we too will live again. Because memory is not a line, it is a loop. And life, in all its fragile brilliance, is the earth's way of keeping the song alive between silences. As this age draws toward its own pause, as the ice waits patiently at the edges of the world, there is still time to listen, to the hum beneath the data, the pulse beneath the machines, the quiet truth beneath the noise, that we have been here before, and we will be here again. The only difference is how much we choose to remember. The cycle turns, the air grows colder, and somewhere deep within the ice, the planet begins to dream again, not of endings, but of renewal. This is not a warning. It is a lullaby for the world between breaths, the song of remembering, carried by wind and water, whispering through time. Everything returns, everything transforms, everything endures. Welcome to the next beginning.